Morning.
Good morning.
So, my relationship with Palm Sunday is a strange one, and I think I checked to see my sermon from last year, and sure enough, the first line in my sermon last year was Palm Sunday is the worst Sunday of the year, um, which seems kind of harsh when I was looking back at it, but I have always struggled with Palm Sunday, and the reason being is because I have looked at it as kind of like your confession pointed out. All these people are yelling and they're celebrating Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, but then where are they when they pull Jesus in front of the crowds and yell, "Crucify him"? And so I've always seen the people lining the road as hypocrites. I've always seen them as people who were not steadfast or strong. And then I realized that I always use Palm Sunday then as kind of a springboard into the Holy Week, and invite you all to spend time this week for Thursday evening, for the Last Supper, for Good Friday, before we get to Easter, to spend some time in the journey that Jesus takes. His close supper with his dearest friends. He pulls them in close at the end. He shares his pain with them. Then, of course, the arrest and the trial, the torture and the crucifixion, and then get to Easter. Don't just kind of go from Palm Sunday to Easter. But as I was thinking about it, I realized that I'm telling you to sit in the dark moments before we get to the joy, but then I'm looking at this joyful moment and I'm just dismissing it. I'm being a hypocrite, because I am saying, spend time in that Good Friday before you get to Easter, but I'm completely dismissing Palm Sunday because I'm like, yeah, but these people, they weren't worthy. Who's worthy? And how do I know what they did or did not do? And so instead of me passing judgment on the people on Palm Sunday who are laying down their cloaks, who are waving their palm branches and perhaps cedar branches, why don't I just look at the event and take it at face value? Why do I have to kind of put my own sort of judgment on the people? Because Palm Sunday, if I think about it, well, I don't really know it was Palm Sunday then because they didn't have Sundays. But anyways, but the celebration of the palms must have been, actually, if I were to think about it without being judgmental, probably pretty important for Jesus. He's coming in for what he knows is going to be difficult. And we see that again after Thursday night when he sits in the garden and he weeps, because he knows he's going to be betrayed by one of those whom he loves and has walked with. He's going to be held in front of people. He sees what is coming to him. So to have that moment when everyone gathers around and yells, "Hosanna, Son of David," to give him that extra sense of acknowledgement and strength when he goes in for his trial, for his tribulation, must have actually been quite worthwhile. Must have been uplifting to see in the people they're celebrating him. And he even says, and not in the Matthew reading, but in one of the other Gospels, he says, if these people didn't shout, even the rocks would. I was thinking about that when I was cutting down our cedar branches, thinking that, they can't be too sad because they're... Anyways, I was also going to start with one of the reasons why I perhaps dislike Palm Sunday is I've never had so many people complain about how I cut the cedar branches as I do on Palm Sunday. Because every year it's like, oh, these aren't big enough. Oh, these are too big. Oh, these aren't all the same sizes. And then the procession is always this sort of awkward kind of... And I'm a sensitive person. I can take a little bit of pain with the criticisms of how I think they actually look quite fine in front. But again, it's that sort of, I am someone who, as those who know me well, does not necessarily always put a lot of stock in planning and organizing everything to the last minute or detail. I like the spontaneity. I like the uncertainty, if you will. And then I think back then to what must have been that Palm Sunday where suddenly people are just moved. It wasn't planned, it wasn't organized. It wasn't as if someone came ahead and instructed people, okay, you'll lay down your cloaks, you'll lay down branches, you yell Hosanna, you yell in a counter. We have the tenors over here, we have the basses, we have the altos, we have the sopranos, and it just happened. And for Jesus just to be in that moment, to have it just unfold in front of him with all these people celebrating and yelling his name, giving him that strength, seeing the appreciation for him, that is worthwhile. And I was thinking about those times when we just celebrate the moment. You know, we don't always have to look ahead. And that's what was my problem was Palm Sunday. I'm always, and because I'll be honest, some of this is just self-centered on me, but it's like, okay, on Thursday I'm in the prison and we're having the Maundy Thursday service. Then I got to do a service for Friday, and that is always a very emotional, even for someone who doesn't necessarily plan as it takes a lot out of me to do Friday. And then I have to flip around and get the Easter service. And so this week I'm always filled with trepidation and also filled with a sense of unworthiness of the tasks before me. And so Palm Sunday, I'm already planning the whole week ahead, and I miss the joy of this moment. I miss the celebration of walking and waving branches. And I think, how often in my life do I miss the moment that I'm in because I'm looking forward to other things? How often do I not cherish the day that I have because I'm thinking about the days to come? I've shared some of the uncertainty that's taking place around my work in the prison with chaplaincy, and it seems that there's more uncertainty that's coming. And I was actually quite grateful. This week I did not go in because I had days I had to take as holidays before the end of the fiscal year. And so I realized I wasn't going to worry about it because there's nothing I could do about it, and I just enjoyed the day that was given to me. And that seems uncharacteristically wise of me, because normally I would just obsess about what was coming, but I just thought, you know what? Enjoy this week. Taking the dog for a walk, us going looking for birds that had not yet arrived, us just spending time together. And there was no big plan. We didn't do anything spectacular, and it was an amazing week. And I realized that there are so many amazing moments that I often just miss because I don't pay attention to. Because I don't take time and just look and see what I have been given. Like Palm Sunday, I'm looking towards the next big event, and I don't focus on what is right in front of me. We have been blessed with life. And then we have been blessed with a God who did not only love us and call us into creation, but has given us the freedom to choose our own lives, who has told us, be, and you can choose right and wrong. And then we have a God who, even when we choose wrong, still loves us and calls us back. That's pretty amazing. And we've been given people to share this amazing life with. And yet, too often we get caught up with looking beyond and not seeing what we have this very day. It is beautiful outside with the sunshine. It's cold, I'll give you that, but it is still a beautiful day. And we should cherish it. We've come together to sing, to worship in the presence of God. And it makes sense for us to acknowledge Palm Sunday just as much as it makes sense for us to acknowledge Good Friday and the pain and the suffering, and then we can get to Easter. Roger loved his family. His family was very important to him. And he thought about them and cared about them all the time. Roger wasn't always very good at telling his family that he cared for them. In fact, Roger kind of just assumed that they knew that he loved them and cared for them. And Roger always felt somewhat blessed. And so he would often, every Sunday, there was a soup kitchen in the city that he would go to. And part of him saw it as a way of thanking God for what God had given him in his life. And so every Saturday he would go and he would work at the soup kitchen, and people would always say, oh, that Roger, he's a saint. He's so good, he cares for other people. And Roger never really felt worthy of it, but he thought it was important for him to acknowledge what God had given him to God, even if he didn't necessarily acknowledge it to his family, by going to the soup kitchen every week. This Saturday, though, was a special occasion for his daughter. His daughter was playing in the provincials. Her volleyball team had made it all the way to the finals of the provincials, and the whole family was excited. Her brothers, her sisters, her mom, and they were all going to see the big game. And when they said to Roger, they said, well, aren't you coming, Dad? And Roger said, well, no, I got to go to the food bank, to the soup kitchen. There are people there who don't have what we have. Those people need me, he says. I need to go there. And his wife called him aside and says, Roger, I appreciate what you do there, but this is a big event for your daughter. He goes, I love her, which is why I go to the soup kitchen. Like, can't she understand that? Can't any of you understand that this is why I go to the soup kitchen, because I love you? And they couldn't understand it. And he was upset that they weren't able to see that his going to the soup kitchen was important, because that's how he acknowledges what God had given him. And his daughter looked at him and was incredibly hurt. So Roger was kind of frustrated when he left the house because no one understood him. They didn't realize that he cared for them, and he kind of slammed the door a little louder than he needed to, got into his car, drove to the soup kitchen, and was in kind of not necessarily his best of moods. And when one of the other volunteers asked him what was the matter, he kind of said, and there were some of the men that were standing there ready to be fed, and he kind of said, wow, my daughter's playing in the provincials, and they thought that would be more important than me coming here and helping all of these people that are in need. Like, what are their priorities? Shouldn't they see that me helping these people is more important than some provincial? And if Roger was honest, he also always got nervous when he saw his daughter play, because he couldn't stand it if she lost. And so it was easier for him just to come after. And he always felt awkward in the stands. In this place, he felt important. He felt honored. It was good for him because people looked at him. There, he'd just be in the stands. And so he was kind of talking to this volunteer about how it was important that he prioritized these people and his family. He would go home and have supper with them. And then they started to come through. And Jim was a regular at the soup kitchen. Jim, if you imagined what someone who lived on the street looked like, Jim would be one of the images. He had white hair all over his beard. He wore clothes that had obviously been on him for a very long period of time. But Jim was a little spooky because Jim always sounded incredibly intelligent. He wasn't kind of slurring his words or anything. He had a sharp mind, and Roger always felt a little uncomfortable around him because Roger liked to think of himself as helping, the poor and the needy. But Jim always made him feel like Jim knew him too well. And so when Jim came through, Jim says, I'm sorry, Roger, can I talk with you for a moment? Roger said, sure, Jim, if you need me to. And Roger said, And Jim said, yeah, I do, Roger. And so Roger, and that was often what happened, is that some of the people coming through would ask one of the volunteers if they could talk to him. Didn't happen very often to Roger, but Roger thought, okay. So he went aside, and Jim said to me, he goes, so I apologize, I overheard you talking that your daughter is in the provincial finals today, and that you chose to be here with us instead. And Roger's kind of like, he's thinking that Jim's going to say thank you, and that Jim's going to say, like, it really matters to us that you care for us. And Jim looks at him and goes, "You're an idiot." And Roger says, "What?" He says, You're an idiot. We appreciate what you do here for us, just like we appreciate all of the volunteers." He says, but this is a special day for your daughter. So why would you not? We would understand if you took this day to be, we would want you to take this day and be with your daughter instead of be here with us. But you're treating it like it's nothing big. But your daughter is playing into provincials. And you're right, maybe 3-4 years from now it won't be a big deal. But right now it's a big deal in her life. And Roger said, "Well, I don't think I should necessarily take family advice from someone who's living on the street." And Jim said, "No, you are right. You should not necessarily take advice from me." He goes, "Because I will tell you that I had a family. In fact, this might surprise you, was a family counselor. And I advised people all the time, which is why I'm daring to do it here, and yet I'm living on the street." He says, I got into an accident. I broke both my legs. They prescribed painkillers for me. I took the painkillers. And then when I was to go off the painkillers, I realized I couldn't sleep well. And so I went back on the painkillers. And suddenly they cut my prescription. And then I started to buy painkillers. And then I sold painkillers. Doesn't matter, he says. I ended up here through my own mistakes. He says, but there is not a day, not an hour, not a minute that goes by that I don't wish I could have just taken a little more of time with my family. If my daughter were to ask me to go to something right now, I would drop everything to do it. It is such a privilege to have people in our lives, he says, who care for us. We appreciate what you do here, but don't forget how important you are to your family. That's all I wanted to say. I just wanted you to know that appreciate everything that you do and that you're an idiot. And with that, Jim went and got his food and sat down. And Roger was kind of stunned because he wasn't used to being spoken to this way. And one of the other volunteers came by and said, "Hey, I overheard that he overheard us, and there's a lot of overhearing here, but I just want you to know that everything that he said to you," and Roger was going to be, so the volunteer says, was bang on. You're an idiot, Roger. Leave now and go to your daughter's game. And Roger did. And when he showed up at the gymnasium, he saw his daughter on the court, and the smile he gave her warmed his heart and humbled him. We are blessed. We have events in our lives that maybe there aren't people waving branches or putting their cloaks down, but are precious to us. When we get to spend time with families and friends, when we have those moments when we realize that God is with us, we should pay attention. This is Holy Week, and I invite you to pay attention to Thursday, to the Last Supper, to Good Friday, and to Easter. But we should also pay attention to the holy moments in our lives, and to the opportunities that we have to celebrate them. Gratitude starts with us seeing what we should be grateful for. And we don't see that if we're just too busy going from one event to the next, to the next, to the next. So I invite you to pay attention to what you have in your life. Just like I invite you to pay attention to Holy Week. But sometimes we spend so much time focusing on the great and the grand that we miss the magnificent that is right in front of us, that we sometimes mistake as ordinary. What I've been doing every week for Lent is I've been inviting people to take a rock from the path in the front. And the rock is represented something different each week. The first week, it was with the temptation, it was the rock that represented something that you would not be tempted by. And it's kind of gone on each week. This is our last Sunday of gathering a rock. And this time, I invite you to take a rock, something that you are grateful for, that you maybe don't give enough attention or time to. I invite you to think of something in your life that is a blessing that maybe, like I've dismissed Palm Sunday every year, is something that you sometimes dismiss or just take for granted, or gets lost in the larger things in life. So this Sunday, when Dawn is leading us in our next song and Carolyn is playing, I invite you to come forward and take a small stone as a symbol of something that you are thankful for, that you are grateful for, that maybe you've missed before. And in this way, let us celebrate the life that we have. Even in the face of difficulties and trials and tribulations, let us realize that we truly are blessed by God.